Welcome back to another Funderbeam Podcast, everyone, and a happy new year to you all. I hope everyone had a good festive period, and whichever way you celebrated it, you celebrated it with people if possible, circumstances permitting, and so on and so forth. We've got a fun guest today, as one sporting goat is currently struggling down under in Melbourne with various COVID protocols and has currently been locked in a room for 8 or 10 hours, I think, trying to sort that out. We're joined by a different type of goat today, and well, maybe Arron Sheppard, who's joining me from the Goat Agency, considers himself a goat, or maybe the agency name will come on to it a bit. But by way of background, the Goat Agency, I would have previously framed it as one of the world's leading influencer agencies, but certainly now is more of a full service marketing agency. And just by way of background, voted one of the fastest growing ad agency by Adweek, up to 190 staff now, worked in 70 countries, over 2,000 campaigns in 28 different languages, and quite incredibly has amassed 450,000 social posts and worked with over 100,000 influencers. Those are pretty impressive numbers, Arron, for a company that's only 6 years old. First of all, welcome, but why don't you give our listeners the kind of origin story of Goat, and maybe you can elaborate on the name as well.
Yeah, hey Ollie, good to be here. I think certainly clarify that I certainly don't consider myself a goat. The agency, yes, but not myself. Background of the agency, so I guess the first thing to say is I'm not actually an advertising person. I haven't spent my career in it. I've had a few different lives. The first one in events in London, and then property out of Dubai and Africa. I lived in Nigeria for 6 months and did a whole load of different things. And then in 2012, I set up a sports social network called Sport Lobster. And really, the Goat Agency came out of that business. My two other co-founders at Goat, Harry and Nick, both worked for Sport Lobster. I hired them both when they were young. Harry when he was 18, Nick when he was 23, 24. And got very fortunate. They turned out to be absolute superstars. And we essentially discovered social advertising for ourselves with our own money from 2012 to 15, and then in 2015 we broke out Sport Lobster and set up Goat. How we sort of ended up doing it is really a sort of testament to the agency landscape, to be honest. We were engaging with, there are some industries in life where people overpromise and underdeliver, and there are others where they underpromise and overdeliver. And like airlines is a weird one because they actually do both, right? If you've traveled in Europe or Asia for most of your life, you are used to a system that underpromises and overdelivers. You buy a ticket, and 100% of the time you turn up to the airport, you get on the plane, everything is what they've sold you. Then you go to the US and you turn up to a flight, and 10% of the people get told, sorry, you can't come on this flight. The first time that happened to me, I couldn't believe it. It was so alien to me that they could get away with that. Because if they did that in Europe, people just wouldn't fly with them. If EasyJet said that to someone, within 6 months, they go out of business because people will go, well, forget that.
I've been in it. I remember trying to get back from Chicago to London and being told that it was 10% overbooked and you'd have to wait till the next morning. And it was just like the most normal thing ever.
Exactly. And the advertising world is the US airline industry, where everybody tells you, I'll give you 100. No problem, I'll get you 100. And then they actually deliver you 60, 70. And because everybody delivers 60 or 70, it's like it's the American airline answer, which is, well, what are you going to do? Who are you going to go to? Someone else? They're going to give you 60 or 70 as well. So it's all much. This is the level we've set. That I just could never accept. And for me, any scenario where someone is willing to underpromise and overdeliver, I will take every day of the week over someone promising me something that they can't actually deliver. So what that made us do was start to look internally at how we could better get new users onto Sport Lobster. And our whole, whole aim of us as the marketing side of Sport Lobster was get new people to join the platform and then hope that the content there keeps them there. So what's the CPA? What's the lifetime value? And essentially our whole thought process was around those two numbers. We had partnerships with the NBA, the NFL, we had Cristiano Ronaldo as a lead ambassador, Michael Owen, Tony Parker, and a load of other guys. And they're all posting about us socially. It was never delivering what we expected it to, but it was great for credibility, but just didn't drive the digital results. So Ronaldo, a third of all of his social posts were about us. So literally 1 in every 3 times that he posted on Facebook to 110 million followers, it was about Sport Lobster for a year and a half. And that generated about 1,800 downloads every time he did. And we were paying a lot of money for that, obviously, because Cristiano Ronaldo. And really, the formation of the agency came from what we did next. And it was Harry, who's now my co-founder at Go, came to me and wanted to give £10 to a guy on Twitter that had 100,000 followers that spoke about football. We couldn't see who he was. He was using a fake name. It was a faceless account, football something. And we gave him £10 to post about us, honestly thinking, well, we're never going to hear from that guy again, but it's £10. And he drove 2,000 downloads of Sport Lobster. And our heads literally fell off. We just couldn't believe that some kid with 100,000 followers had converted 2% of his audience when Ronaldo couldn't convert 0.002% of his audience. I mean, at the time, Cristiano Ronaldo had 110 million followers and that kid had 100,000. But the guy with 100,000 drove more downloads and a better lifetime value than Ronaldo did. So lesson 1 for us was what is going on here? Who are these people? How do they have power and control over their audience in order to get to act? And how do we do as much of this as we possibly could? The next month is where we learned lesson 2 and what really set us up for Go in the long run. And that was logically then, as anyone would, right? Once we found that first guy, we said, well, let's go find as many people like this as we possibly can. So for the next month, we used about 100 influencers that were as close to this guy as we possibly could, deliberately, right? Went for people that had 100,000 followers, spoke about football. The accounts looked and sounded, as close to that first one as possible. And what we found was that from that next test, the results were really, really interesting. And what we essentially learned at that point was 80% of influencers don't work, can't convert their audience in the way that the elite ones, those 2,000 download ones can. And those results from that next 100 were really varied. 20% delivered 1,800 plus again, some of them delivered 2,500, 2,700, but 80% of them didn't work, couldn't convert their audience, delivered 5 downloads, 10 downloads. Now, okay when you're running a tenner, but the disparity was very, very clear. And so from that moment onwards, we understood 2 things. 1, if you can use influencers in an authentic way and influencers that have the ability to convert their audience, it is the most powerful way to spend $1. The most powerful way. However, if we could understand which of the influencers were actually operating in that 20% versus the 80% that didn't work, and as exclusively as possible use that 20%, then we had the best ad network, the best ad engine anywhere on the planet. And, fast forward 8 years on from that, was 6, 7 years on from that. 8 years on from the initial one, 6, 7 years on from starting Go. Now we've used over 250,000 influencers. We did 200,000 bits of content last year. The level of data and optimization we have around who works and who doesn't is business. We know who can sell a $20 makeup brush, a $10 a month streaming service, $2,000 laptop, a $40,000 car, whatever it may be. Not just sell the product, but down every little bit of the funnel. Who can drive views? Who can drive engagements? Who can drive, click-throughs, sign-ups to landing pages, app downloads, whatever it may be. There are loads of different KPIs that we're targeted on. All of that data feeds into our central internal CRM system that essentially ranks all influencers on a cost per basis. So if we're looking client comes to us and they want to release a promo video to a certain audience where, historically they've just gone and put the money on Facebook, they put 100 grand on Facebook, they get, 1 million views, we'll go and guarantee them 1.5 million views, same watch time. And we're doing that because we're going into our system, understanding, okay, who can generate as a cost per view of X, and then only buying from those people, right? So we've essentially created the first set of data that actually understands which influencers work and which don't. And when you're dealing at scale, like we are with lots of our clients, using that 80%, when you're a brand, Unilever spent $8.5 billion a year, right? $8.5 billion a year on advertising. They're buying brands that are 60, 70, 80% social, right? That they haven't bought Gymshark, but it's a famous one that people know. They've bought similar things like Dollar Shave Club and stuff like that. They built it the same way as Gymshark, all social. So Unilever buy brands that are 70, 80% social, but their legacy brands are 2, 3%, if that, right? So Unilever are saying very openly, hey, we like this 70, 80% social, but then they've got 8.5 billion of which virtually nothing is going towards social. Over the next 2 or 3 years, I believe that's going to go to $3-4 billion, right? Now you're spending $3-4 billion. If 80% of it's on the wrong people, you're going to burn 2 billion, which is nuts, right? And so ultimately, that is our USP, is we know who works and who doesn't. Now, on top of that, as you said at the beginning, we've got 190 social experts who really understand what works in different verticals. Our gaming team are gaming experts, our fashion team are fashion experts, our pet team are pet experts, whatever it may be, right? We go into verticals where we understand how to make consumers engage with brands, and we do it through the people that we know that they're gonna engage with in the most efficient way possible, essentially.
So, I mean, people starting out with a business, all the usual stuff. What's our marketplace? What problem are we trying to solve? You've created a solution, let's say in your head, that you want to get more bang for someone's buck, and you can see how to do it. But let's just dial back. How do three guys, probably sitting in a shared workspace or something to begin with, go about gathering the volume of research that's necessary to facilitate the system you now have 6-7 years on? Because as you said yourself, it's about the CRM you've built, but on day one, you've got some use cases from Sport Lobster, but how do you scale that? I mean, is this like we get funding and just find humans, or is it growth hacking your way through? I mean, how was your kind of day one?
No, so we didn't take funding. We're unfunded for 1.5 years. It was only when we moved to the first major office that we took funding for the first time. And in hindsight, didn't need it, but just, it's $500,000 layout, and we're thinking, don't really want to use $500,000 of our cash, maybe we'll go and raise some. We've been doing this for 3 years at Sport Lobster for ourselves, right? So our first clients were sports clients where we'd already used 10,000 influencers and we already had data sets. How we differentiated ourselves when we went into the market is going back to that airline example. We put our money where our mouth is. And ever since we started Go, we guaranteed results to our clients. When our clients came to us and said, can you do this for us? If our answer was yes, it was yes, and we'll guarantee it for you. Rather than yes and then deliver them 80%, it was yes and then deliver them 110%. And then we just organically grew from there, right? Where most of our work now comes from our existing clients recommending us to other people. We are one of the very, very, very few agencies on the entire planet that will over deliver for clients. And we live in a landscape, like I said at the beginning, where that just isn't common. But we used what we had, and then we just kept expanding, right? And that's really how the trial and error network, kept going. There was a point where we did our first fashion client, and we hadn't done any fashion stuff, and we were a little bit less aggressive on the on the guarantees, but we still guaranteed. We just took risk. We personally took risk. And that's the biggest barrier to entry now, Ollie, is, I say this all the time. People say, people just start guaranteeing against you. Well, good luck, right? If it's $100,000 spend and you get it wrong, it might cost you $300,000. Or you give up halfway through, give the client the money back, and it costs you $50,000, and you don't work with it again. So, the ability to guarantee is ultimately what sets us apart. Now, we can only guarantee because we've got the data, but right at the beginning, we just had some strength. We're very, very careful about what we guarantee. We worked our absolute asses off to make sure that even if we overpromised something, we just made it happen, and we just made a lesser margin, and we just, made sure that we delivered the best results for our clients.
Well, and this is what's, for me, having in previous roles and, probably in this one to engage some fairly punchy, well-known, big, multi-network, multi-layered agencies, owned by billion dollar top-down co's, have been let down so many times. And you kind of go in, as you get the pitch that we're so massive, you need to be with us, and this is the way to go. And I won't name any names, obviously, but most people know where these agencies live. And you, within 6 months, you're having these very stressful meetings where you're looking for genuine results rather than account management updates. And I think that's where, I think you and I have spoken about this before, but that's where your spend, as you were saying earlier, is starting to come more like this and more like this. True performance, as opposed to brand and rep and all the rest of it. This is going to go like this eventually, because your brand and rep's going to come with the performance and all the other clever stuff we can do anyway. But that, it's very, if you're a marketing director, like myself, or you're in that role, you're putting you're putting your balls on the line when you're doing your budgets. You're saying we're going to do X, and then you go to a big agency and you hope that they can do it for you. But actually, let's be honest, most of them don't give a shit, about that, and because you're just one of a load. So it's great. It's great to have that.
I think the big difference between us and everyone else is their teams are not incentivized to do great work for clients. It doesn't make any difference to them. Big agency model is, we'll spend your money for you, right? And we'll take a percentage of that. So they don't give a shit where they spend it. They just want to spend the money. Whereas our team, from the second we are engaged with a client, have a guarantee that we have to beat. So any optimization we can take, we do, because it makes us more money by doing it. So we actually have an incentive to produce better work for our clients. And the reality is other agencies don't. They have an incentive to make the process as easy as possible. They have an incentive to create less stress, to create less hassle, to take the easy route. And that is what ends up in this situation. There's no optimization. Every day we optimize. And I know there are agencies sat there going, yeah, every day we optimize. Bollocks. No, they don't. No, they don't. Because they don't need to. Because every 6 months they'll lose a client and they'll think, oh, we should do something about this. But on a daily basis, they're not optimizing, really. Changing assets every 10 days is not optimization, right? We're running 10 tests a day on clients, you know what I mean? It's because, and obviously for our clients' benefits, but primarily for our own benefit, because I've already guaranteed that client the results, so now we have to deliver it. And if we fail, we're the ones that lose money, not our clients. And that is the biggest difference. It's the same for all of our suppliers, everyone. I want them to operate in the same way. Don't promise me something and then not deliver it. Charge me more, fine, but make it happen. Let's take this. Let's take the uncertainty out of this. And I think one of the big reasons why marketers have been able to get away with this for so long is the separation of creative and media. Right? We live in a world, we have for the last 10 years, where some creative agency goes and decides what it should all look like and what we should say, and then a separate media agency is responsible for going and delivering the media. And if it doesn't work, the media agency will blame the creative agency, and the creative agency will blame the media agency, and no one's responsible for it. right?
And likewise in integrated agencies, each side blames each other, even though they work in the same building.
Exactly. Oh yeah, the fact that they're under the same holding groups are relevant, right? They're not really speaking to each other, and they're just trying to keep the same thing going. They really are. The people selling TV now can't truly believe in it. Can't. They can't wake up in the morning and think, yeah, this is all, TV's going to have a resurgence. It's good. Of course it's not. But the big agencies are still selling TV at the same rate because that's where they make their money. And if they switch to something where they only make 8% net margin, whereas TV, they might make 20, then that's a really bad business decision. Now, long term, if they don't move, they'll die. But I think the people running it are too focused on today's share price and not focused enough on 3-4 years down the line, right? And that's where you get people like Sorrel coming in and having a bit more of a long-term view and having a more digital. And I don't think S4 is a perfect structure by any stretch of the imagination, but I like it a lot more than I like WPP.
Yeah. I take all of that on board, and it's good for our listeners here, especially those in Estonia who aren't familiar with some of these kind of UK centric or US UK centric brands, to know that for years that both of those marketplaces have been fairly dominated by one or two large holding groups that have hundreds and hundreds of umbrella agencies underneath them, all with their different USPs, but a lot of them essentially selling the same shtick. But we won't get too much into that. Just specifically back to the influencer market, which was not only your origin, but also part of your USP, identifying the fact that the followers of a person are more likely to engage with that person directly rather than the brand that sits above who's paying. What were the early challenges? I mean, obviously influencer marketing has numerous different facets to it, but there are definitely challenges to it, especially finding genuine ones and people with genuine audiences and engaged audiences. You said your first test case, you've got a dude that's got 100k followers who obviously were super engaged and real people and all the rest. What were some of the early challenges and those that still remain, for people out there that are thinking of using influencer marketing or stuff like that? What were the main challenges for you guys to overcome, specifically, around influencers?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there's a few of them. One of them is a continuous one, which is that you just don't know if someone can deliver it until you've actually used them, right? People talk to me all the time, particularly the sort of investor community and things like that around AI, and this idea that, maybe you can just map it out, right? And figure out who works and who doesn't through AI. And, the person that creates that will become a billionaire. But I don't believe it's possible. I personally think the only way, because we've used so many where we've run tests and you can't work it out, the only way to actually know if someone's going to work, because there's so many different factors that contribute to it, is to actually use them. So that trial and error nature, is still happening today, right? We've used over 250,000 influencers now. Within 2 or 3 years, we'll have used probably 1 million, right? And 750,000 of those new ones we use, we'll probably not ever use again 500,000 of them, right? Because just off the bat, they just won't work. We continually expand our database by essentially using 85% of the people we used before in order to set the guarantees. And then we test with 50% of new people on every campaign in order to keep expanding that reach. The influencer landscape has changed so much in the last 6-7 years. I mean, it was so much the Wild West when we started. It's almost hard to believe. People that you will follow and have heard of who now are celebrities sending us handwritten IOs and things like that. You owe me 300 quid in crayon on a piece of paper. That 6-7 years ago, whether people put hashtag ad and things like that was a bit sort of, don't know if we do that. Is that going to make a difference? We actually very early on realized, it only affects it by about 3%. So let's just always declare it. It's not worth it. But the industry has moved on an enormous amount in the last 6 or 7 years. I mean, I remember going into people 2 or 3 years ago and saying, come on, you need to be doing influencer marketing. And then still CMOs look at me like, really? It's just, where's that PR? Our PR team are doing that. You know, now I'm having conversations with people around, maybe we move 60% of our budget to social first and we go down the Gymshark route and we go that, like, why aren't we doing this? And that is just a development of the industry. You know, there's still think the mainstream media doesn't understand what influencers are. This is not Love Island people. This is not some bikini model posting about a diet pill or something like that. This is people with niche followings talking to their audience about something that everybody in that community cares about. You know, and whether it's, you know, we did something with 3M recently around welding helmets, right? Where we're selling new welding helmets, and all the influencers are welding influencers who all they do is put content up of them welding in the woods somewhere, things like that. And this new welding helmet comes out, and they're all reviewing it. That is influencer marketing. You know, if we're selling a beauty brush, it's not some girl that's been on Made in Chelsea. It's far more likely to be 100 beauty artists that have got 50,000 followers, but all of the other beauty, you know, all the other makeup artists follow those people because they're actually influencers within the community. So, you know, I think the market's developed enormously. There's still a huge amount of trial and error going on, and I speak to, you know, most of our clients before they've engaged us have had that 2 out of 10 experience with influencer marketing, right? They've used 50 influencers, and some of them have been brilliant. They can't work out why. 40 of them were crap, and they sort of just said, oh, maybe the channel isn't that good, right? And it really, how good your experience is right at the beginning is luck. If you use 10 and you happen to get 5 that are in that 20%, you'll think, oh my God, this is amazing, let's do more of it. But you might also get none that are in that 20%, right? By using us, you ensure that you're going to get that.
Well, I think that's whether it's yourselves or another agency with the experience. I think a lot of people have been burned by trying to do it themselves. Maybe they do a bit of desktop research, they do a couple of hours, they see the top 20 people that have the most followers, and then they just go straight at it. It's, you know, you wouldn't do that in any other form of, you know, it looks like you can research it yourself. It's a bit like Facebook ads, isn't it? It looks like a very easy thing to set up. Anyone can do it in a few minutes, but that's because Facebook want you to spend the money. It's not actually that easy to get the results if you're not well versed at it.
Completely agree.
One thing that you mentioned earlier was the number of staff you've got and how quickly you expanded. What were the challenges for Goat as a business with quick expansion? I mean, you knew that you had a position in the market, you had a USP, you had a value proposition, and this is the point where most people are like, right, how do we go from here to here? How do we capitalize on what we've got? What were the biggest challenges from an operational point of view? And I think there's, you know, for our listeners who are founders, not just our investor listeners, but our sort of founder listeners, this is something that I think most people are interested in. How do you take advantage of the quick growth but still stay operationally smart?
That's a good question. And I think we've done better at it at times than others. I think fundamentally, we've just always had belief that we can make things happen and can train people and can move quickly. We focused a huge amount on our people. We delegated, I think, earlier than most people would delegate, and continue to, right? And I see that's what holds, you know, other agency groups back, right? It's weird now because when we were in the first year or so, when we were a 5-6 person agency, I'd go and meet these 20 person agencies and think, oh, these guys are way ahead of us. Now those agencies are still 20 person agencies, and we're this thing that just keeps growing. And the biggest difference I see is that the owner of that 20 person agency thinks they have to do all of the important stuff, all of it. And so they can never truly grow beyond themselves. And if, you probably can't manage more than 20 people if you're doing everything yourself, right? So we took chances on young, smart people, trained them, gave, we didn't just throw them in, we trained them, gave them, all the tools, and then we threw them in, right? And some people drowned, right? Some people didn't make it. We've always had a meritocracy at Goat where it doesn't matter where you're from, what you did before. We're not looking for people with 15 years agency experience. Actually, a lot of the time, that's a negative for us because those people think they know how the world works, and in our opinion, they don't, right? So actually, a lot of the time, take a kid, train them, create better results. But the biggest thing for us was just getting out of the way, right? Just getting out of the way. And what that simply looks like is you have a clash of two really big meetings. You feel like you need to do both. What the person with that 20-person agency does is moves one meeting to the next day and does them both. And the person that's trying to build a 1,000-person agency takes their next best person and says, I trust you, go and win us this. And you do one and the other person does one. And even if you don't win them both, because you've done that the first time, the next time, you've got a much better chance of winning them both. And the reason to do it is, what about when it's 5 a day, and 10 a day, and 20 a day, and 30 a day? We've always understood that this was going to be a media channel. And so the scale of this was going to be enormous, and we were going to need a load of really bright, sharp people. And, the three of us are obviously completely involved in the business, but 95% of the business runs without us touching it now, and it runs under brilliant managers who were not necessarily brilliant managers 5 or 6 years ago or 3 years ago, but were given the opportunity, were given the training, and we basically took a chance on some bright people that turned out to be absolute superstars for us. And I think, honestly, that's the number one thing. The number one difference between us and a 20-person agency is that attitude. There's nothing really in my mind that is so important that I'm the only person that can do it.
Yeah, sure. How did you guys identify what, would you consider the key areas for expansion? I mean, obviously in the agency world, there's account management, there's creative, there's any number of different departments. Did you feel like you needed kind of client-focused stuff to begin with, or did you need the data people to begin with? What was your kind of first thought of right, to scale up, we need to look at this area?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So the three of us as founders, our roles sort of split across the business. I'm top level business direction and frontline sales, essentially, right? So day one, when it's just the three of us, literally day one, I'd go out, speak to the client, convince them we're the right people to go with, go to Harry and say, right, Harry, this is what we need to deliver. You need to figure out a way to do this. We need to be able to guarantee them this, this, and this, and this. So all of Harry's focus is on the delivery. Mine's on getting the client happy. And then Nick's role is all the stuff in the middle, keeping that client happy over the long term. And then we essentially just built teams out to run that process. So it always started with the sales and the client, right? And I see that people go and hire a load of staff ahead of time because they think they're going to win something, and they don't win it and they're in a lot of trouble. We never really did that, right? We always led with, let's go and win the work, and then we trust ourselves and our model and our data that we'll be able to bring people in quick enough, train them quick enough. When we need someone, this sounds nuts, right? Because I know loads of people are struggling to hire, but we're not, right? We get 10,000 job applications a month that go. So if we need 10 campaigns people tomorrow morning, we'll have interviewed 200 in the last 3 months, and we could just go bang, 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 and we'd have 8 people start in 2 weeks. And so, we've always run the business like that. Like, let's not get fat. Let's be aggressive. Let's make sure we win the work. Let's set the guarantee, and then let's make sure that we deliver it. And those things are absolutes, right? The The relationship between me and Harry is, this is what we've told the client to do, and under no circumstances can we not deliver this. Under no circumstances.
It's pretty cool to put a bottom line in like that. And I think it's also, anyone that's done any kind of, I don't know, I would call it old fashioned, but sort of degree level study on marketing will know there's a big fat book they give you at the beginning. And about the most useful bit in that big fat book is the first chapter, which is about being market orientated. The rest of it you can probably put in the bin. But it's when you guarantee or at least put a black line in saying this is the bare minimum we have to do, it shows the market orientation. You're there to deliver for someone else. You're not focused inwards and you're not focused outwards. And I think that's bringing me on to an interesting question from a business point of view and looking inwards and outwards. And you can answer this however you like. Would you think that your expansion and the need to get bigger was driven A, by you wanting to grow the business, or B, driven by needing that capability going forward to serve clients and customers in the best way possible? Because there's obviously, you can think about expanding a business because it's going to help revenue and all the rest, or is it like we need to do this in order to provide the guarantees that we've made?
Yeah, it's the second one, really, right? It's we won this work. It's $4 million. It's all next month. How the fuck are we going to deliver that? We need people. We need this. We need this to make it happen. We've done some stuff at Go that lots of people would say is impossible. Timescales that are impossible. We've had stuff where we've won it at 5 o'clock on a Friday, and it has to be delivered by 7:30. And most agencies wouldn't even contemplate it. We won that work because every other agency said, "Oh, it can't be done," and we went, "What do you mean it can't be done? Of course it can be done." And we figured out a way to do it. And that sort of unstoppableness, which does come from our model of, well, we've guaranteed this, so we best go and figure it out. But it all came, Ollie, from me being the co-founder at Sport Lobster, the one writing all the checks, and thinking, if any agency came in and offered us this, we'd buy it all day long. And that was it. I just thought, we've got to make people an offer they can't refuse. And if you spent $100,000 on Facebook last month and it got you X, and I say to you, move that to me and I'll guarantee you X plus 20%, why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah, look, and I think in the world of performance marketing, all you want is to know your spend is there.
Everything is performance. People think performance is just selling products. It's not. People go and spend money on outdoor advertising and on TV for things around awareness, right? So a lot of our guarantees are around awareness and consideration side. So maybe if it isn't even sales, maybe it's you spent 5 million last month and that generated you 45 million views on this content with a watch time of 20 seconds, with a click-through rate of X. We'll guarantee you better results on all of those metrics too. So it isn't just all the way down to sale, it's the whole way up the funnel. Why aren't we getting better results? If someone else got you 1 million for X and I can get you 1.5 million, whatever it is, why wouldn't you do it? As long as it's apples and apples. And that's our whole model. It isn't just we'll guarantee you the sale at the bottom. It's actually, that's the thing we don't do, is guarantee the sale at the bottom, because it's in our clients' control. Now, we're selling a lot of products for our clients and it rolls month on month, but it's the one thing we can't guarantee. Everything else up until that point becomes guaranteed. So it just makes it easier when clients are looking at setting their media budgets out and everything else.
But it also allows people like me to double down.
Yes.
Like if it works, I can just spend more. Because if it works and it brings in an X revenue for me for every bit spent, well, I'm going to spend more so I can get more. And that's always been the not the problem, because TV advertising is what it is, but knowing exactly what it does for you, knowing whether to invest more, that's the tricky bit for people in positions who are writing checks. But if someone's shown you a nice formula and you've got a couple of months of proof that it works, well, let's go more, let's go harder until we're at the end of it.
And that, I think, is the biggest change over the last 2 or 3 years, this has become a channel now, a full media channel that can be measured against other media channels. Lots of our clients are running big MMM reports and things like that, where they're measuring 30 channels, and social influencers, I've never seen it not in the top 3. You know what I mean? Across every single channel. And that, once you start measuring it like that, then the budgets move really easily, because it just becomes a numbers thing, right? If you're measuring ROAS against every channel, you just move the budget into whatever's producing the best ROAS, right? Without damaging the brand.
Yeah. And okay, just before we sign off, how do you think what has been done over the last 3 or 4 years, and there's a whole load of stuff online, you can't miss Web 2 to Web 3 and all of this at the moment. Do you think that the transition from, people talking about ownership of content and all this stuff, do you think the transition's going to take away what you guys built the agency on, the principles, or do you think it's going to just be added to over and over? Micro influencers are going to become even more prevalent, but maybe they own their own media a bit more. Maybe they're more savvy. Yeah. Maybe they know. Because one thing I would say is that although I'm fully aware of what's going on, there is a little overhype of this idea of people not owning content. People have been owning their own content since they were able to write a blog, and those people who are many of your influencers, in fact, are still going to be around. That's never going to change. But the technology and the speed of being able to do things, decentralized systems and so on, do you think this is an opportunity for you guys to just carry on, or is it like we need to actually spend a proportion of our time and effort adjusting or moving the dial? How do you guys feel about it?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. It's definitely an extension of our space, right? And I would say that Meta is just like the metaverse in general is just social 2.0, right? We're talking about people having accounts and avatars. Like it's Facebook. It's just a 3D version of it, right? And so, if anything, influential people are going to have even more power and control in this new world. Now, the democratization of everything, the DAO side of things like that, I think is really interesting. And I think how the relationship between creators and their audience is going to change, and maybe they'll be less reliant on brand deals than they were before, for example, but are consumers going to be more or less influenced by influencers, creators, whatever you want to call them? I think the answer is more, right? And I think we're seeing that now, right? That the Bored Ape price jumps up because Steph Curry buys one, and then because Jay-Z buys one, and whoever else buys. Like it's the same thing, right? And then you go to more micro ones, and there are the Twitter sort of NFT crypto community. There are loads of influencers and creators in there, loads of people that when they say, right, let's buy this, everyone buys it. So I'm personally very heavily invested in crypto, and own nearly 200 NFTs, and I'm a massive believer in this space. I think it's dangerous, and we should probably be aware of what we're signing up for here, because I actually don't like what it is, right? I don't want to live in the Matrix. I don't want to live in a VR headset, but I don't know if we can stop it. And from a business point of view, I think it's going to create a lot of opportunities. But it's a weird one, because I think bits of it are being overhyped, and bits of it are being completely lost and therefore underhyped, right? And I think some of the noise around the avatar side of things, with a lack of utility around NFTs, I think is overhyped. But then I think when I look at some of the things that Facebook are actually building around the metaverse and things like that, I think we're not talking about it enough. So, ultimately we're going to be led by the data, Ollie. So, for us, that's just another channel, right? If people are spending time in the sandbox or whichever other virtual world it may be, it's essentially the same thing as them spending time on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or YouTube or Twitch or Discord or whatever it may be. We can still influence people on Discord by using influencers. We can still influence people on whichever channel it is by using influencers. And then just have to follow the data to work out what sort of budget you're putting, why, what the click-throughs are, the data, everything else that runs off it. But it's, I would say it's both a threat and an opportunity to us, but it's a much bigger opportunity to us. And this will also take longer than people think, right? The brands should have moved heavily into influencer and social over the last 5 years, and they still have scratched the surface of what's possible. So, it'd be nice to think, they'll all be really heavily in the metaverse in 2-3 years' time. It'll probably take them 5 or 6 still. I don't think.
Yeah,
I think it's coming, but it's not here. It's interesting how many brands have got on board, more than I thought would. But we're talking still about a tiny percentage of the global population that hold an NFT, for example.
Sure, and there's a huge education piece to be done, but of course, in a decentralized world, there's no one that wants to, no one can lead and be the person. But then that comes right back to your influencer model that we started with, because there's a number of people who position themselves as educators, evangelists, and so on in this world, and they're not just selling snake oil, but the principle is that, and this is where obviously the younger generation are going to have a more organic trust than maybe you and certainly our parents' generation would, because they've been used to a world full of regulations. And those regulations, to be fair, I had a little chat with someone on LinkedIn about this last night. Those regulations are well founded. They're put there for a reason, because at some point banks, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, did a very similar thing. They took your money and you trusted them to do the right thing with it. But of course, people don't always, and that's why regulation exists. So it's very interesting to move into a world where things are decentralized, democratized, and so on. But anyone out there that's thinking of this stuff, just please do your research, because it's very easy to lose funds and make mistakes. I hold my hands up. I made one recently in a rush. I tried to invest in a new crypto round, and I sent the wrong currency to the wrong blockchain, and it's gone. That's it. But that can happen very easily if you're not concentrating on what you're doing. There's all sorts of things out there just to be aware of, and there's no one to hold your hand, and there's no one to to go to and say, "Oh, I made a mistake. Can I get my money back?" So,
that is the biggest thing holding all of this back, right? Is it's so complicated. It's so complicated, and you've got so many different wallets. There's no fall. You make a mistake, that's it. You lose your cold wallet password, gone, right? Whether you've got 5,000 on it or 500 million, it's gone, right? There's nothing you can do about it. And for me, it's like the internet in the late 90s, where it's 20-second dial-ups and all these sorts of things. When I look and play and use the ecosystem, it's so clunky. And that will change. And as it changes, it will onboard people. But you're absolutely right. Like, this is not something that people should be, thinking, I'll just have a little fiddle, or I'll just shove a bit in here, I'll do a bit in here. Like, if you don't know what you're doing, don't do it. I mean, we're talking today, and, a day when crypto's down 10% everywhere, right? Like, everything is. And, it's the most volatile asset market out there. I do personally think that it's a 10-15 year investment that is the right thing, because I can't see how on a global level crypto doesn't become an established thing. But even if crypto becomes an established thing, it doesn't mean Bitcoin will, or Ethereum will, or Solana will. The central banks might get together and create their own currency, and all these others become pointless, basically, right? And so I think there is a lot of ups and downs to go here. I admire people that are heavily in the space, and I would say if you're a 17-year-old listening to this, or you've got a 17-year-old son or daughter and they're thinking, oh, don't know what to do, don't go to university, what should I spend my time doing? What I would be spending my time doing if I was that age is 10 hours a day on Discord, understanding what is actually going on, trying to get into that community in a proper way, do 3-4 months of research and then, go and make some decisions. But, I am incredibly bullish on it as an overriding industry, but I think 95% of projects will go to nothing. And I think there'll be a lot of people that don't really understand this that get burnt. And there'll be other people that put $1,000 in and become a billionaire, right? And the problem is the vast majority of people will not. They'll put $1,000 in, it'll go to 100, and that'll be that.
Yeah, and just as we come to the end, our usual disclaimer that anything we've spoken about today, investing in early stage companies or indeed any volatile asset involves risk. Arron, thanks very much for joining us. It'd be great to catch up in a year or so, or whenever, to talk through progress again, and maybe come back and touch on some of these topics, because it's a fast moving world, and it's good to stay on top of them. So thanks very much, and look forward to catching up with you anytime soon.
Pleasure. Thanks, Ollie.